If you've ever sat on the tarmac for hours wondering why your plane just isn't moving, or if you've heard about planes getting dangerously close in the sky, what you're about to learn might shock you. Right now, the US air traffic control system is stretched so thin that airports are cutting schedules, and air traffic controllers are working 6 days a week under intense stress and fatigue. But how did we get here? And more importantly, what's being done to fix it before a catastrophic mistake forces change the hard way? Stick around because this might be the most important aviation issue that you have never heard about. In this episode, we'll explore why having enough air traffic controllers is so critical to aviation safety and efficiency, what's causing the current shortage, the consequences we're already seeing as a result, and what's being done or could be done to fix the problem. We're going to break this down into clear chapters with real quotes from experts and officials to help paint a full picture of this complex issue. So whether you're an aviation professional, an aviation enthusiast, or just a curious traveler, stick with me because this truly is an issue that affects us all. Our dedicated air traffic controllers keep the flying public safe every day. This is a quote from Mike Whitaker. Air traffic controllers are often the invisible guardians of the sky, working behind the scenes so that tens of thousands of flights every day take off, fly, and land safely. But what happens when there aren't enough of these guardians? That's what we're here to find out. Before we really dive into it, let's talk about the different chapters of how we're going to navigate this episode. Chapter 1 is going to be all about what air traffic controllers do and why their role in this ecosystem is so critical. Chapter 2 will unpack the root cause of the controller shortage, from a retirement wave to training bottlenecks to funding woes, the impact of COVID-19, and more. Chapter 3 will analyze the consequences of understaffed control towers and radar rooms. Think flight delays, safety risks, and economic impacts, and how it affects the industry and the public. Chapter 4 will describe solutions and proposals that are currently on the table, including new FAA hiring initiatives, legislation in Congress, and technological innovations that are aimed at improving the current system. Finally, we'll finish up with a forward-looking perspective on what's next and how we can ensure that our skies remain safe and efficient for the years to come. We've got a lot of ground to cover, so let's jump straight into it. Chapter 1, the vital role of air traffic controllers. If you've ever listened to any sort of aviation radio chatter, you know that pilots are constantly talking to air traffic control. But controllers do far more than just granting takeoff clearance. Let's break down what air traffic controllers actually do and why they're so important. Ensuring separation. At the most basic level, ATCs, or air traffic controllers, ensure that airplanes never get too close together. They monitor aircraft positions on radar and by sight, guiding planes along specific routes and altitudes to maintain a safe separation. This prevents collisions in the air and on the runway. Managing traffic flow. Controllers orchestrate the complex choreography of air traffic. In busy airspaces like New York or Los Angeles, hundreds of planes may be moving at once. Controllers sequence arrivals and departures, direct pilots through climbs, descents, turns, and manage the flow in and out of airports so that it's orderly and efficient. Navigating weather and hazards. When storms erupt or turbulence flares up, controllers work with pilots to reroute aircraft safely. They might guide an airplane around a thunderstorm cell or hold an aircraft on the ground for the weather to clear up. Essentially, they are a safety net when conditions get tough. Multiple domains. There are different types of air traffic controllers, each working at different facilities. First, there's tower controllers. These guys manage airplanes on the ground and within a very close vicinity to the airport, typically within about 5 miles and up to a few thousand feet. They clear planes to take off and land and ensure that runways and taxiways are safe. Kind of grouped into this group are also ground controllers. Next, we have TRACON controllers, or terminal radar approach controllers. These guys handle airplanes in a metropolitan area's airspace from about 5 miles to 50 miles out in those intermediate altitudes. They guide planes after they take off, as they depart the airport area, and line up inbound aircraft for their approach. Finally, we have center controllers, or ARTCC, or Air Traffic Control Center controllers. These guys oversee the en route phase of every flight. This is often at high altitudes between cities, often covering huge regions of the country. They hand off aircraft to approach controllers, and then approach will hand them off to tower controllers as they near their destination. Another role of air traffic controllers is that they are a communication hub. They're in constant radio contact with pilots, and they coordinate with other control facilities facilities. For example, as a flight moves from en-route airspace to approach airspace, one controller hands it off to another with updates on the flight's route and altitude. And finally, they are emergency responders. If something goes wrong, a plane has an emergency, a loss of radio contact, or a pilot becomes disoriented, controllers are going to spring into action to provide assistance. They're going to clear other traffic out of the way and guide the aircraft to safety if it's possible. They are trained to stay calm under immense pressures. In short, air traffic controllers are the conductors of the vast nationwide orchestra that is our airspace. Without enough controllers, the system just can't perform well. Imagine an orchestra missing its conductor. The music would turn into chaos. The same goes for the skies. If controllers are overworked, or if positions are unfilled, delays spiral and risks multiply. To underscore how vital their role is, consider this. The United States has the busiest, most complex airspace in the world. Before the pandemic, we were handling roughly 16 million flights per year, carrying close to 1 billion passengers. On any given day, around 5,000 aircraft are airborne over the US at any time. The only reason that works is because an army of roughly 14,000 skilled air traffic controllers are actively managing the systems. As we'll see, that number itself, that 14,000, is part of the problem because it should be higher. But even at current levels, each controller is handling a tremendous workload. It's often said in aviation that safety is paramount. Air traffic controllers are a huge part of why aviation is so safe. They prevent accidents by catching mistakes or hazardous situations early on. When you step onto an airliner, you might think about the pilots, but equally, there's a network of controllers watching over your flight from gate to gate. If that network is stretched thin, then risks can increase. One recent example of this was in January of 2025, where there was a tragic mid-air collision over the Potomac River near Washington, D.C. This involved a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter and a regional jet. 67 people were killed. The National Transit Safety Board, or NTSB, noted that only one controller was handling both the helicopter and the airplane at the time. Normally, there would be two. The FAA itself said that that was not a normal situation, but it did not by itself violate any safety rules. But it underscores how staffing can directly impact safety. If a controller is juggling more planes than normal, the risk of oversight grows. We'll return to safety incidents later on, but keep this story in mind when considering why staffing is literally a life or death matter in extreme cases. So, to sum up this chapter, what do air traffic controllers do? They keep planes safely separated, manage air traffic flow, help pilots navigate bad weather and emergencies, and essentially run the entire airspace from the ground. Why are they critical? Because without them, flying would not be nearly as safe or efficient. Every flight that you take has dozens of air traffic control professionals behind it, guiding it from gate to gate. This importance is exactly why an air traffic controller shortage is a big deal. And unfortunately, that's exactly what we're facing right now. Chapter 2. Why is there a shortage? Now that we understand how crucial air traffic controllers are, the next question is, why don't we have enough of them? How did the world's busiest aviation system end up understaffed in its control centers and radar centers? It turns out this shortage has been building for years, and there's no single cause. Instead, it's a perfect storm of factors. Some were predictable, and some were unexpected. In this chapter, we're going to break down the root causes of the air traffic controller shortage in the US. One major factor is the demographic of the workforce. Many controllers hired in past decades are now reaching mandatory retirement age. Unlike most jobs, air traffic controllers must retire by the age 56. In fact, controllers can even retire younger than 56. They're eligible for a full federal pension at age 50, as long as they have 20 years of experience. There's also an upper age limit for new hires. You generally can't be hired as a controller over the age of 30. What this means is that the FAA can't just bring in a 45-year-old aviation professional off the streets to fill a gap. The pipeline is young by design, and the career is shorter than normal. Well, these rules help ensure that controllers are in peak cognitive shape, this also means that a huge chunk of the workforce can age out at around the same time. We saw this dynamic play out because of a huge event called the 1981 PATCO strike, or PATCO strike. This is when President Reagan fired over 11,000 controllers back in 1981. The FAA had to rapidly rehire and retrain a new generation of controllers in the mid-1980s. Fast forward to 30, 40 years, that wave of controllers has been hitting their mid-50s and heading into retirement. This created a retirement wave in the late 2010s, early 2020s. As seasoned controllers leave, replacing them isn't necessarily easy, and we're going to get into that later. Even those not at 56 yet might choose to retire when they hit age 50. This is a high-stress job. According to one analysis, one reason for the shortage is that the FAA allows controllers to retire at 50. In other words, this career naturally tends to be shorter than most other professional careers. Recognizing this problem, officials have even floated ideas to adjust this rule. In early 2025, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy said he would offer controllers the chance to stay on past age 56 to help alleviate the shortage, even offering higher pay for those who choose to do so. Duffy told Fox, "I can offer them the chance to stay longer past the mandatory retirement age of 56, pay them more, make the system safer, and alleviate the pressure on controllers." This indicates how severe the shortage actually is. It's rare for officials to consider bending the long-term age limits. Desperate times may call for desperate measures. However, even if the rule changes, who says that controllers are going to want to stay on past the age of 56 anyways? It's a demanding job that not everyone wants to or even can continue past that point. The bottom line is a large cohort of controllers have been retiring, and the FAA must bring in new people to replace them. This leads us into our next issue, training. Becoming an air traffic controller is not like onboarding for your typical office job. It takes years of training and practice. Typically, new hires go through 3 to 5 months of training at the FAA Academy in Oklahoma City, and then 2 to 3 years of on-the-job training at their designated facility before they're considered fully certified to work all positions on their own. It's a rigorous process with a high washout rate. Not everyone who starts training will finish it. This long training pipeline creates bottlenecks. Even if the FAA hired 1,000 new controllers today, it could be 2027 or 2028 before all of those people are qualified to work traffic without supervision. During those years, the trainees need experienced current controllers to supervise and monitor and mentor them. This ironically adds more workload on the veteran controllers. In fact, the Department of Transportation noted having certified professional controllers training new hires is a significant burden on the current FAA staffing levels. The FAA and the NATCA, which is the Air Traffic Controllers Union, are acutely aware of this issue. One union representative, Dean Lacapelli, testified to Congress, "It took 10 years to lose 1,000 certified professional controllers. You can't regain them overnight." This highlights that rebuilding staffing levels is a long-term game, not an overnight fix. Compounding the issue, until recently, the FAA was hiring below the levels needed to grow the workforce. The agency had a training academy capacity, or a limit on how many students they can bring in each year. They often didn't max this out due to budget limits or other constraints. This led to what NATCA calls a staffing crisis, as the pipeline simply wasn't keeping pace year after year. However, there has been recent progress. The FAA has started to supercharge hiring. In 2023, they hired 1,500 new controllers, and in 2024, their goal was 1,800, which they exceeded by hiring 1,811. This is the largest number in nearly a decade. As Whitaker put it, "We will not rest on the success of this hiring push. We are already thinking about how to meet our goals this year and for the years to come." By late 2024, the FAA reported that it had nearly 3,400 controllers in various stages of training. That's a big number in the pipeline, but remember, they aren't fully certified yet. One more training wrinkle. Historically, the FAA hired a lot of people with previous experience, like ex-military controllers or those from collegiate ATC programs. They still do recruit from those pools, but the military itself is producing less controllers than in the past. This is due to their own automation and staffing changes. And the FAA's collegiate training program has been around for years, but is now being revamped. In 2023, the FAA announced an enhanced air traffic collegiate training initiative, partnering with select schools to provide a more robust training that might accelerate or supplement the academy training. For example, Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University was one of the partners mentioned, giving students simulation experience that could count towards the FAA requirements. Despite these efforts, the reality remains. Training air traffic controllers is slow, and when facilities are already understaffed, it's harder to train newbies on the job because there are fewer seasoned people there to do the teaching. It's a bit of a catch-22, and it means that the shortage can't just be resolved by a quick hiring spree, but it needs long-term good hiring numbers. Another root cause lies in the realm of funding and politics. The FAA, like other federal agencies, operates under yearly budgets, and it's subject to the whims of Congress. There have been periods of funding instability, including threatened or actual government shutdowns. This directly affects controller staffing. For instance, in late 2023 and early 2024, the FAA narrowly avoided a lapse in funding through a series of short-term extensions of its authorization. The FAA Reauthorization Act, a major bill funding and guiding the agency, was delayed in Congress, prompting concerns about what would happen if the authorization lapsed. Even the fear of a government shutdown or funding gap has consequences. The FAA might freeze hiring or even stop training classes if they are unsure about what the budget is. NATCA President Nick Daniels warned in March of 2025, in the event of a shutdown, critical safety support staff would be furloughed and vital support programs would be suspended, making it increasingly difficult for air traffic controllers and other aviation safety professionals to operate at full capacity. He noted that a shutdown would furlough hundreds of controllers and trainees and halt their progress in the academy, causing significant delays in the training pipeline and exaggerating the ongoing staffing crisis. This has actually happened in previous shutdowns. During the 35-day shutdown of 2018 and 2019, controller training stopped, new hires were stalled, and even qualified controllers had to work without pay, drastically hurting morale. Beyond shutdown drama, there's the issue of general funding levels. For many years, hiring and training at the FAA did not get the level of funding priority one might expect given the critical need. The DOT Inspector General has issued reports chiding the FAA for not implementing a proper workforce plan or for using an outdated staffing model. In fact, until recently, the FAA's staffing targets were driven by a model that might underestimate needs. A collaborative work group recommended higher targets, around 14,000 controllers needed, but the FAA was initially targeting only around 12,000. This is being corrected now by Congress, mandating a better model and maximum hiring directives. But historically, underestimating how many controllers were needed led to fewer being hired and trained in time. Furthermore, consider the FAA's operating budget during COVID-19. When air traffic plummeted in 2020, the FAA adjusted by reducing training and even letting staffing levels dip because fewer flights were happening. This was a short-term cost-saving measure that had long-term repercussions. The FAA even offered some early retirements because traffic was so low in 2020. But when travel demand rebounded in 2021 and 2022, the controller workforce hadn't magically rebounded alongside of it. In essence, a temporary dip in flights led to paused hiring and training. But then an unexpected rapid recovery left the FAA playing catch-up. We should also mention the toll of bureaucracy. The hiring process for a job like this can be lengthy. There's an application window, sometimes only open for a couple of days each year. Then tests, interviews, clearances, medical exams. The FAA has updated its policy to streamline this. In fact, the FAA said in late 2023 that changes to the hiring process shaved off about 5 months of the wait time from application to academy entry. Still, it can take many months from the day that a person says, I want to be a controller, to the day they actually start training. These administrative hurdles can hurt the pipeline as well. We touched on this earlier, but let's understand how COVID-19 disrupted ATC staffing. In 2020, the FAA Academy in Oklahoma City shut down for months due to COVID restrictions. No new classes started for a significant time, and on-the-job training at facilities was curtailed to avoid too much close contact. Even existing trainees couldn't always get the instruction they needed, since everyone was in pandemic mode with social distancing. The result was a training backlog. People who would have been certified in 2020 may have been delayed to 2021 or even 2022. Meanwhile, as noted, because airline traffic was way down, the FAA slowed hiring. They essentially decided not to bring on a bunch of new people when they temporarily needed less. Travel came roaring back faster than expected, and the controller workforce was out of the position to meet it. There were also COVID outbreaks among controllers that occasionally shut down facilities and stressed staffing. You might recall stories from 2020 of entire airport towers being closed for deep cleaning when a controller tested positive. These incidents made clear that staffing was sometimes thin enough that losing just a few people could cause major delays. By 2023, the pandemic itself was less of an operational disruption, but its after effects on staff and training lingered. The FAA, in its workforce reports, explicitly calls COVID a fact for short staffing. Beyond the age limits already discussed, there are other policy and workforce factors that affect the attrition of this industry. The FAA loses a number of controllers that just don't make it through the training program. They also lose some controllers for other opportunities or just for personal reasons. Some transfer to other FAA jobs, some resign due to stress, and sadly, a few die while they're employed. It's a large workforce, so this is evidently going to happen. All these losses means hiring has to not just meet the needs, but backfill positions every year. Staffing allocations. Sometimes the controllers are there, but not in the right places. Certain busy facilities like New York's TRACON, which handles JFK, LaGuardia, and Newark, have been chronically understaffed, while a few less busy towers might technically have a slight surplus. The FAA tries to redistribute the workload. For example, they shifted control of Newark's airspace to Philadelphia in late 2022. However, by 2023, that wasn't showing clear results and arguably just stressed out the Philadelphia facility. To paint the numerical picture of the shortage, as of late 2023, the FAA had about 10,800 fully certified controllers on board, when it really needed 14,400. A shortfall of nearly 3,600 air traffic controllers, or 25% below normal levels. Another statistic for you, of the 313 FAA air traffic control facilities around the country, 90% of them were staffed below the FAA's own goal. Only 23 of them met their targets. Some critical facilities were especially hit hard. For example, the New York TRACON in 2023 had only 146 air traffic controllers and their target was 226. They only had about 65% of what they should have had. Philadelphia's tower and TRACON was below 60% of its staffing goal. The most understaffed tower in the country in 2023 was Rochester, Minnesota, at just 47.8% of its target staffing. Essentially, they were running with half of the people that they should have had. These numbers illustrate the fact that the shortage isn't abstract. It's quantifiable and spread across the entire system. Why doesn't the FAA just hire quicker? Well, as we talked about, budget, training time, and a limited pool, you can't hire older folks, and not everyone can pass the selection and training. They are now trying to accelerate, but it's somewhat like turning a big ship. It doesn't happen on a dime. Additionally, until working conditions improve, there's concern that retention could even worsen. Controllers are overworked, lots of overtime, stress, etc. Some may even opt to retire at the earliest chance. To sum up the causes, the ATC shortage has been driven by a wave of retirements due to an aging workforce with a mandatory retirement age, lengthy training times that just couldn't keep up, funding and hiring practices that lagged behind needs, the shock of COVID-19 halting training, and policies that limited flexibility in managing personnel. All of these factors converged to make the situation that we have now. Too few controllers for too many flights. Now that we know why this shortage exists, let's explore what it actually means on the ground. How does a controller shortage manifest itself in daily operations? What consequences are airlines, passengers, and controllers experiencing? Chapter 3, Turbulence from the Shortage and Consequences. What happens when you don't have enough air traffic controllers? In short, the entire system strains. Passengers feel it as delays and cancellations. Controllers feel it as stress and fatigue, and airlines feel it in their schedules and their bottom line. In this chapter, we'll delve into the real-world impacts already unfolding due to the controller shortage. It's not a hypothetical future problem. It's here now, affecting aviation in multiple ways. Flight delays and service cutbacks. Perhaps the most visible consequence of the shortage is flight delays. When an air traffic control facility doesn't have enough people to handle the normal flow of planes, the FAA has to slow things down to maintain safety. They might issue a ground delay program, which holds flights on the ground before they can depart, or an airspace flow program, which spaces flights out en route. We've seen this in action notably in the Northeast. Take Newark International Airport in New Jersey, one of the nation's busiest hubs. In late April and early May of 2025, Newark experienced an unusual stretch of severe delays. On some days, up to 40% of flights were delayed, and around 20% of them were canceled. Now, while there were multiple factors in play, like runway construction and some equipment outages, staffing shortages at the Philadelphia Tracon were a key driver. The FAA actually had to declare Newark's airspace a flow-constrained area due to low staffing, meaning they imposed measures to meter and limit the amount of traffic that the controllers could safely handle. In practice, that meant flights were drastically delayed or even turned back. One United flight from San Francisco to Newark got halfway across the country and then had to turn back and fly back to San Francisco because of an ATC delay at Newark. Imagine being a passenger on that flight, 5 hours in the air only to end up where you came from. United Airlines was so affected, they preemptively cut 30 flights a day from their Newark schedule to ease the pressure. United CEO Scott Kirby and others have been quite vocal about ATC staffing issues. United and other major carriers even petitioned the government to extend slot waivers at New York City airports through October of 2025 because they anticipate the ongoing ATC challenges. Slot waivers essentially allow an airline to fly into an airport less frequently and still reserve their slot. This problem isn't just isolated to Newark, though. Florida has also seen its fair share of ATC delays, especially in its very busy airspace, with both heavy traffic and space launches. Atlanta, Dallas, Denver, you name it. Anytime one of the larger regional control centers or approach controllers is short-staffed on a given day, you can see the delays ripple across throughout that entire region. According to the National Airspace System Safety Review Panel, overloaded ATC facilities lead to an inefficient operation, requiring constant juggling and sometimes forcing the FAA to reduce volume. In fact, by early 2023, the FAA was already negotiating schedule reductions with airlines in certain areas and implementing more ground stops when needed. From the airline industry perspective, these aren't just headaches, they're dollars. Flight delays and cancellations cost airlines money. Cruise timeout, fuel is wasted, maintenance schedules are thrown off, and passengers have to be compensated or rebooked. It's difficult to put an exact figure on these delays, but it's certainly in the hundreds of millions of dollars industry-wide. During the Newark issues, United Airlines explicitly blamed the FAA staffing shortage for the disruptions, as did other airlines. Even the FAA acknowledges that travelers are likely to see more delays, especially in peak seasons, until staffing is up. Secretary Duffy, at a press conference in May of 2025, cautioned that while measures are being taken, filling the gaps could take several years, and travelers may continue to see delays during the upcoming summer travel season. He was frank that people have seen that it takes longer to fly, and there is more delays and much more frustration. So for the average passenger, yes, the controller shortage might be why your flight is delayed. It's not weather or a mechanical issue. Sometimes it's simply that there's not enough people in the air traffic control facilities to handle the flight. Now let's consider the toll on controllers themselves. While staffing is short, the remaining controllers have to work more to cover those gaps. This often means overtime and 6-day work weeks. NATCA's president noted that many controllers are working 6 days a week, 10 hours a day to keep the system running. That kind of schedule over a long period of time leads to fatigue, stress, and a potential for burnout. During a government shutdown, or even under normal shortages, air traffic controllers are even required to work during government shutdowns because they are labeled as essential employees. In the 2018-2019 shutdown, controllers worked without pay for over a month, which was brutal for morale. But even in non-shutdown times, overtime is at an all-time high within the FAA air traffic controller ranks. The Safety Review Panel noted that excessive overtime is causing more absenteeism, lower productivity, and increased fatigue. It's a vicious cycle. You're short-staffed, so you call people in for overtime. But the more they work, the more likely they are to need a sick day, or just be less sharp due to fatigue, which then further exacerbates staffing issues. Fatigue in air traffic controllers is a real safety safety concern. Even a well-staffed facility can have issues with controller fatigue due to odd hours, overnight shifts, switching schedules, etc. And then on top of that, the shortage amplifies that problem. Recognizing this, the FAA administrator recently announced a change. Controllers will now get a minimum of 10 hours off between shifts and 12 hours off before an overnight shift. This policy change is aimed at reducing fatigue-related risk by ensuring better rest. It was one of the recommendations from a fatigue committee he commissioned. While this is a positive step, it also means that scheduling is a bit trickier with few bodies to plug in. But safety comes first, so the FAA is trying hard to balance that. There have been some extreme instances illustrating controller stress. The CBS report on Newark and Philly mentioned that at one point 20% of controllers in Philadelphia called out for trauma after an incident where their radars went dark for over a minute and they lost contact with the planes. This underscores that the job is high stress. A technical glitch like lost radar can be traumatic, and if you're already stretched thin, such events hit even harder. NATCA clarified that these were not walk-offs, but justified absences under a federal employee compensation program for workplace trauma. Still, needing to take leave due to stress from equipment failures, that's an alarming sign to how close to the edge some of these facilities might be operating. Another consequence is critical redundancy is lost. Normally, ATC likes to have redundancy, extra eyes, or splits of sectors, so that if one person gets overworked, another can pick up the slack. But if staffing is minimal, there's no cushion. The NTSB example of one controller doing the job of two controllers at night in DC is a case in point. The safety margin is thinner. Also, training new people gets harder when staffing is low. Trainers have to oversee trainees, which can add to their mental workload. If they're already tired, the quality of training can suffer, or it can slow down, delaying certification of new controllers further. All of this affects morale. Controllers take great pride in their work. It's often said to be a calling more than a job. But if you're constantly exhausted and worried about making an error due to overload, it can diminish that passion. We haven't yet seen an exodus of controllers out of frustration. One reason for that is many are close to getting their pension, but the FAA and the NATCA are watching retention carefully. That's why part of the solution has been offering incentives for experienced controllers to not retire the moment they hit eligibility. To quote NATCA's Nick Daniels, the increased stress and fatigue from working long hours cannot be overstated. Controllers are humans, not machines. If they're asked to do too much for too long, there's a risk of mistakes. And in air traffic control, mistakes can be catastrophic, which leads us to safety risks. First off, let's be clear. Flying is still extremely safe. There has not been a spike in accidents attributable to ATC staffing issues, and authorities maintain that they will slow things down before they let safety be compromised. As Secretary Duffy emphasized, if there are safety concerns due to staffing or equipment, FAA officials will shut down or reduce air traffic until they are addressed. The primary mission is safety, so the system will err on the side of caution. That's good to know. However, aviation is built on layers of safety nets, and one of those nets is adequate controller staffing. When that layer is threadbare, we rely even more on the other safety layers, like pilot vigilance, technology, etc. There have been some near-miss incidents that, while not directly caused by staffing, raised questions about whether fatigue or workload could have been a factor. In 2023, there were a lot of high-profile near collisions on runways, like one at JFK in New York. Two planes nearly collided during a takeoff clearance, and another at Austin, Texas. The FAA's safety review team looked at those and other incidents. They found that the complexity of operations has increased, even as staffing decreased. They didn't pin the blame directly on the shortage, but they did say that the system is operating with constant reshuffling of resources and people being stretched thin. They pointed out that critical redundancy was being eroded. For example, in a well-staffed scenario, you might have two controllers monitoring a busy approach, one talking to pilots and another scanning for traffic conflicts. If you're short, you might only have one person there instead of two. That doesn't automatically cause an accident, but if one person misses something, there's no second pair of eyes to catch it. Moreover, with the shortage, some smaller facilities are combining positions, meaning one controller might handle what normally two controllers would, especially during off-peak hours. Again, not automatically unsafe, but not ideal. The mid-air collision in DC in January of 2025 is an example where investigators are looking at staffing as one aspect. It may turn out unrelated. We don't have a final report yet, but the fact that it was highlighted shows concern. Also, Reagan-Washington National Airport had a near miss on the runway around the same time as the JFK one, adding to the scrutiny of whether controller staffing or fatigue could be an issue. To the FAA's credit, as soon as these incidents happened, they started a call to action, forming the Safety Review Panel, convening a summit, and accelerating efforts to getting people hired and trained. They don't want to see a tragedy due to staffing. Another subtle safety risk: when controllers are overworked, mental health can suffer. That could lead to distractions or slower reaction times. Even something like taking shortcuts in communication could lead to miscommunications. Aviation communication is heavily procedural. Phrases, readbacks, etc. to ensure clarity. There's another subtle safety risk. When controllers are overworked, mental health can suffer. That could lead to distraction or slower reaction time. Even something like taking shortcuts in communication because you're too busy could lead to catastrophic miscommunications. Aviation communication is heavily procedural. Phrases, readback, etc. They're all there to enhance clarity. A stress controller might inadvertently clip a phrase or accidentally read something wrong. We should note that technology has helped maintain safety too. Modern collision avoidance systems on aircraft, or we call it TCAS, serve as backups. They can warn pilots if they get too close to another plane, even if a controller doesn't issue an alert in time. So the system is resilient. But everyone agrees that restoring adequate staffing numbers will only improve the safety margins and reduce the chance of an error. Also, side note, I know that the lighting and my shirt has changed like 5 times throughout the course of this video if you're watching it on YouTube or Spotify. I've had some technical issues recording this, so this is like day number 4 of trying to record this video. Okay, back to it. There's also the safety of controllers themselves that we need to consider. Working fatigued can harm one's health in the long run. Cardiac issues are well documented for shift workers. NATCA leaders have mentioned these health and well-being concerns. One quote from a union official that resonates with people is, "The people are more than the aluminum," meaning yes, getting flights out is important, but not at the expense of the people managing them. The U.S. aviation system is a huge economic engine. It supports millions of jobs and contributes trillions of dollars to the economy, from airlines, tourism, cargo, etc. If that system slows down, there's an economic cost. Delays and inefficiencies caused by an air traffic controller shortage can act like a brake on economic activity. Let's talk about a few reasons. The first one is airline revenue and cost. We touched on cost to the airlines. If they have to reduce flights like United did in Newark, or they can't add new routes because ATC can't support them, that's lost revenue. Airlines plan to meet demand. If they are holding back, it also means fewer flights for travelers and potentially higher fares due to constrained capacity. Another thing is passenger time. From a passenger perspective, time spent waiting on delays has an economic cost, even if it's just lost productivity or vacation time. If people start to doubt the reliability of air travel, they might fly less or cancel trips, which then hits tourism and all businesses in the travel-dependent sector. Another thing that's often overlooked is the cargo side of things. It's not just about the airliners. Cargo carriers like FedEx and UPS rely on the air traffic control system to deliver packages overnight. Delays there can disrupt supply chains. Another thing is business jets. If flying becomes more of a hassle, some business travelers might opt to find other alternatives, either like video conferences or driving. Another thing is the ripple effect. A shortage-induced delay in one city can ripple to other cities. For example, if New York City gets backed up, let's say maybe a flight from Denver might get held up, causing that plane to arrive late in New York, and then its next leg to London is delayed, and so on and so on. The interconnectedness means that the inefficiency spreads. And finally, growth and innovation. Looking forward, the aerospace sector is growing. Think about the rise in drones, commercial space launches, and perhaps even air taxis. The air traffic control system will need to incorporate these. If it's already struggling with core airline traffic, it might slow the integration of these new aviation technologies. It's very, very difficult to put a dollar amount on all of these issues. But let's consider the antidote. In summer of 2023, airline CEOs were practically begging the FAA to increase staffing because they knew that a summer of delays would hurt their bottom line decline substantially. A Reuters report quoted Airlines for America, the major airline trade group, saying the current and foreseeable staffing levels are neither adequate to give the consumers the travel experience they deserve, nor are they able to maximize the efficiency of the New York City airspace. That sums it up pretty well. Travelers aren't getting the service they expect, and the airspace can't be used as efficiently as it should be. Both are economic downsides. Moreover, the shortage has drawn enough public attention that it's become a topic of conversation even outside of aviation circles. Finally, consider the human side of things. Controllers under stress might take more sick leave or have health issues. Trainees who see a very tough work environment are going to drop out at higher rates. That's going to worsen the cycle. A veteran controller mentoring a rookie might say, "This job is great, but right now you can see how tough it is because we are so short." That might cloud the new generation's view of things. So the consequences of the air traffic control shortage are multifold. For travelers, it means more delays and disrupted plans. For controllers, it means harder working conditions and potential fatigue. For airlines and the economy, it means inefficiencies and financial costs. And for the aviation system, it means a tighter rope to walk on to maintain the safety and performance that we've all come to expect. The good news is that everyone recognizes that this is a serious issue, from the flying public all the way up to the highest levels of government. That means that efforts are underway to address it. In the next chapter, we'll shift to a more optimistic gear. What's being done about the shortage? What solutions are in play or proposed, and how they might help? Chapter 4, Navigating Out of the Crisis, Solutions and Innovations. It's time for some good news. Steps are being taken to fix the controller shortage. Solving it is not easy, as we've established. You can't just snap your fingers and produce fully trained air traffic controllers. But from government initiatives to technology upgrades and industry adjustments, there's a concerted push to get the system back on track. Let's explore the major solutions currently in progress around the horizon. The most immediate solution is just hiring more controllers and training them faster without compromising safety. The FAA has significantly amped up its hiring efforts in 2023 and 2024, and plans to continue that in coming years. As mentioned, the FAA hired 1,500 controllers in 2023 and 1,811 in 2024. This was meeting or even exceeding their targets. For 2025 and onward, Congress and FAA leadership are aiming to sustain these high numbers. The new FAA Reauthorization, the big law that passed in 2024, actually requires the FAA to hire to the maximum capacity for the Academy for the next 5 years. So for example, essentially that means that if the Academy can handle, say, 1,800 new trainees every year, the FAA must try to fill these slots every year. This legislative push is a direct result of recognizing that the shortage is a problem. They're also trying to widen the application pool. The FAA runs periodic recruitment drives. One such window was in the summer of 24, and there was another window in the fall of 24. They even extended an application period in October to try to attract more candidates. Social media and outreach campaigns shout out messages like got what it takes to be an air traffic controller to younger audiences, emphasizing the good pay and overall rewarding and challenging nature of this job. The agency is trying to cast a wide net, including efforts to try to hire more women and minorities. This is big because this field has historically been about 80% male. By diversifying the recruitment and making the opportunities known widely, they hope to bring in the best talent from all corners of the country. The FAA is also actively trying to recruit ex-military and others with prior experience. These candidates can sometimes be fast-tracked through training. There's also talk about bringing back recently retired FAA air traffic controllers on a short term, but like we mentioned, this is still technically illegal. The Enhanced ATC Collegiate Training Initiative launched in 2023. This means that certain colleges can train students in air traffic basics to a level that might allow them to skip some of the academy coursework. We saw partnerships with colleges all over the country. This not only creates more training, but also spreads awareness of this career to college students. By the time they graduate, they could be very well positioned to enter the FAA Academy and succeed even faster. We also need to talk about simulator and facility upgrades. One constraint on training at facilities is having enough simulators to practice focus on. The new FAA legislation directs the agency to deploy modern tower simulators to more facilities. Enhanced simulators means that students can practice these scenarios offline without tying up live positions, potentially speeding up their learning. Also, upgrades in training software at the academy are being pursued. There's also talks of maybe even opening up a second academy. In the final law, it ended up becoming a directive to expand the capacity of the current academy rather than building a new one. This could mean classes in parallel, or perhaps running the academy at full capacity year-round. The FAA is also trying to streamline its hiring process. The FAA has modernized its screening time, the biographical assessment, and aptitude test to be more efficient. They also moved some steps online that used to be required to be done in person. All of this aims to shorten the time from application to entry on duty, which was traditionally over a year, but is now coming down. Ex-FAA Administrator Whitaker refers to himself as recruiter-in-chief, indicating how top priority this is. And indeed, the funding from Congress, the FAA is poised to bring in thousands of new hires over the next years. The hope is to not just reach the need of 14,000 controllers, but maybe even surpass that with a comfortable buffer. We should also talk about the incentives for relocation and retention. Hiring newbies is half the battle. Keeping experienced controllers from leaving is the other half. In 2025, a significant move was made on this front. The Department of Transportation and the NATCA reached an agreement on an incentive retention program. Here's some key points of that. First is the stay-on bonus. Certified controllers who are eligible to retire, they've either hit that magic number of age 50 plus and years of service or age 56, are being offered a 20% bonus of their base pay for each year they delay their retirement. That's a substantial incentive, basically an extra 1/5 of their salary as a reward for sticking around. For a controller, say making $130,000 a year, that's a $26,000 bonus per year to not retire. This hope is that this slows the exodus of veterans, buying time for the rookies to get up to speed. There's also an academy graduate bonus. New trainees who successfully complete the academy will get a graduation bonus, reports say somewhere around $5,000, to recognize that achievement and encourage them onward in the on-the-job training. So throughout this video, we've studied why an air traffic controller shortage is detrimental to everything. We've also learned about why this shortage exists. And then we've talked about what we're doing to prevent it. All of these incentives recognize that experience matters. A 10-year veteran controller is extremely valuable and can work complex traffic much more efficiently than a brand new controller. So retaining even a fraction of those eligible to retire can significantly mitigate the shortage in the short term. Secretary Duffy highlighted these in his 2025 announcement, emphasizing that they are addressing years, if not decades, of aviation issues, and that we can't snap our fingers to make up this gap. But these incentives will help bridge it. The DOT was candid that we may not see full staffing until 2027 or 2028, even with these measures, but each year should get a little bit better. We've referenced the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2024 a few times. This is a major piece of legislation, 5-year, $105 billion for the FAA. This contains numerous provisions to fixing the FAA staffing issues. We already talked about the FAA mandating maximum hiring. It also is forcing the FAA to upgrade and update its staffing models. The FAA is also going to be held accountable when it comes to reporting issues when it comes to training. On the policy front, beyond Congress, the FAA and DOT leadership are also doing things like evaluating age limits, changing scheduling rules, and trying to find more collaborative working opportunities. Another piece of proposed legislation to note, there have been standalone bills focused on ATC hiring that didn't pass on its own, but was folded into the reauthorization. The key is that these issues got lawmakers' attention. In the medium to long-term, technology will also play a huge role in mitigating controller workload and making the system more efficient so that the impact of a shortage isn't as severe and future staffing can meet higher demand. As we've journeyed through the issues of the air traffic controller shortage, we see that it's a challenge decades in the making, brought to a head by recent events. but it's also one that's spurring action and innovation. What lies ahead? Here's a forward-looking perspective as a conclusion. In the short term, travelers should brace for a little bit more turbulence in the form of delays, especially during peak travel seasons like summer and holidays, at least for the next year or two. The FAA and airlines are being more upfront about this. The hope is that each year, as new controller classes come online and staffing inches up, those delays will ease up. By summer 2025, the FAA is planning on having more controllers available than summer of 2024, and the summer of 2026 will have more than the summer of 2025, and so on. For the controllers on the job today, relief is finally coming. Now colleagues are arriving from the academy. Overtime might eventually drop down to normal levels, and initiatives like Better show that the system is trying to support them. It's important that these professionals feel valued and supported, because they're going to be the ones mentoring rookies and maintaining safety in the near term. So far, the signals are positive. Pay raises through federal pay adjustments, new bonuses, and public acknowledgement of their hard work is helping to boost morale. Looking a bit further out, say 3 to 5 years, if all goes as planned, the FAA will have caught up with the retirement wave by around 2028. Projections suggest the number of controllers should either meet or even slightly exceed the targets, essentially pulling out of the nosedive. Now, one potential wild card here is that the FAA needs stable leadership. Frequent turnover at the top is going to slow down progress. Additionally, avoiding any new budget cuts will be key. Predictable funding, which is something the NATCA has long advocated for, ensures that training classes are not canceled and hiring plans aren't derailed. The flying public might not notice when things improve quietly. We tend to notice failure more than success, but they will surely appreciate smoother travels. Perhaps by 2030, we'll look back on the mid-2030s ATC shortage as a learning moment that led to a stronger system, more resilient staffing levels, modernized technologies, and maybe even a little bit more flexible of an approach to managing the workforce. There's also the next generation to think about, not just next-gen technology, but people. Even as we fill current gaps, we should inspire young people that being an air traffic controller is a fantastic job. It offers a unique blend of challenges and public service with good pay. At least that's what I'd imagine. Obviously, I'm not an air traffic controller. We saw tens of thousands of applicants whenever the FAA opened hiring, so the interest is there. Continued outreach, maybe starting in high school or via video game simulations, could ensure that we have a robust talent pool. In the future, maybe we won't rely on the FAA Academy. Perhaps partnerships with universities or even the private sector will create multiple paths into becoming an air traffic controller, making the workforce more adaptable. One more forward-looking point. Airspace demand is growing and changing. We might have drones carrying freight or suborbital space tourism flights and other new users of the airspace coming in the coming years. Solving the controller staffing issue isn't just about getting back to 2019 status quo. It's about preparing for the 2030s, when air traffic control might be even more complex. In conclusion, the air traffic control shortage is a serious issue, but with an optimistic outlook of what to. If you like this video, do me a favor and hit subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor, hit a like. If you're watching this podcast anywhere, please give me a rating, and I'll see you next week.